Okay, our PHP scripts are ready, and we can now continue working with our mobile application and complete the search feature. So when user taps on search button, our search bar search button clicked function is called. And here we can start implementing our search business logic. And the first thing that we need to do, we need to make sure that there is something that user typed in. It's not empty, and we can use if statement and use a search bar text and check is empty. And if it's empty, we will simply return. Otherwise, we can continue and implement search. And I will declare a new function. I'll call it doSearch. And doSearch will accept the search keyword. I will read it from search bar text. And we'll send it off to our PHP script. So I will need to define a new function, doSearch. And it will accept a search word, which is going to be a string. Okay, and in this function, once it's called, we don't need our keyboard anymore, so we can dismiss it. And to dismiss a keyboard, we can reference to our search bar and call for resign first responder function. This will dismiss our keyboard and it will disappear. Next that we want to do, we want to create a URL connection to our PHP script, and we will define a new variable. We'll call it my URL, and that will be an s URL with the string, and the string is a complete path, a complete URL to our PHP script. So if I go back to my NetBeans development environment and look up the complete path to my script. Okay, my NetBeans development environment is up and running, and I have my search bar case insensitive project is open. So if I tap on a run, it will call for the script, but it's index PHP, so I will need to replace it with find friends PHP. So if I try opening it from a browser window, it will display a message missing required information, so I know it's a correct script. I'll just copy the URL to this script and close it, and I don't need my development environment anymore, and I'll paste it here. So that's going to be our NS URL. Next, we need to create a mutable HTTP request and specify that we are going to be using HTTP POST rather than, for example, HTTP GET request. I'll just give it a little more space here. Okay. Then we need to create a string, a POST string, which will contain request parameters, our search word, which was passed to us from doSearch function, again as a parameter, and user ID. Now this user ID I hard coded here. I know it's 23 because I'm just creating an example, but in your case it's probably going to be an ID that identifies user, or ID. When user logs into your mobile application, you'll probably fetch some results from a server side, and that will either be user ID that you will store inside of your mobile application, or some unique token that will identify your user. So you will need to send it here with the search word to your PHP script, so it can query for friends of this user. If you're not returning information that belongs to this particular user, then of course there's no need to pass any details that will identify your user on a server side, and you might pass search word only. Okay, our post string is ready, and we can now set it to our HTTP request as HTTP body. So we say request HTTP body equals post string, and we are using UTF-8 string encoding. Okay, our request is ready, and we are now ready to send it off to our server side, and we will use a task. So I will create a new variable task, and I will use ns URL session shared session to instantiate a data task with a request, and we need a completion handler. So yeah, this one. So the first parameter is our request, which we have just set up, and then our completion handler is going to be is when the completion handler triggers, it will return a few objects to us. One of them is data, which our server side will return, and we will call it data. And then the entire response object, we will store it into, we will assign it to a response object, and then ns error. If something goes wrong, for example, if our HTTP request times out, then ns error will be populated, and error object will be available to us, and then we can display a message to user why this what happened and why HTTP request could not be sent. We will add resume to our task. Task resume, and we are ready to continue with it. Okay, so inside of our task, we will probably want to check for error first. And if our error message is not nil, if something happened to our HTTP request, then we can display an alert message. So I can check for error message. So if error object is not equals nil, then I can display an error message here. Display an alert message. Let's build it and see if we don't have any error messages. Yes, build is successful. And we will return, because we do not want to continue if there was an error message. Okay, otherwise we can display response to our user. And first of all, we will need to read the convert whatever server side sent to us to a JSON document, from JSON to a dictionary object, because server side responds back to us with the JSON document, and JSON document is just a string. So we will use ns JSON serialization to take the data from our completion handler, and we will convert it to ns dictionary so that we can work with it. And then we will check if our JSON variable is not empty. So we will use iflat, and then basically check if our JSON holds any data, and if it does, we will assign it to our parse JSON variable, and then we can read some of the keys from that variable. And if we remember from our PHP script that if our search result is successful, then we will create a new key in our return value with the name friends, and that friends key will contain an array of friends read from our database. So I will need to check if just using the same iflat, I will check if our JSON document contains, if our parse JSON contains a key friends, and that's going to be an array of any object, and if it does, it will be assigned to our friends. And we can then if this statement is successful, we will go into our if, and then we can loop through our array of friends, and for each friend we will create a friend object variable, and then we can read this friend object, and that friend object will contain first name and last name keys, because in my database, if I go quickly to my database friends, each record has first name and last name, and this is what I'm going to be displaying in my mobile application. So what I'm taking, what I'm doing, I'm reading first name as a string, and then I'm reading last name as string, and I'm concatenating it together to a full name, and then I'm adding complete name, or this full name, to my search results array here. Search results is an array that is used to determine how many rows will be in our table view, and it will be used to display information in each of our table cells. So basically we read data that server side sent to us, and we populate search result array. If, however, our friends object was not there, and again, if we remember our PHP script, if parameters were not, if required parameters were not provided, like if user ID was not provided, or if search word was not provided, we would create a new key and add it to our return value, and that key was a message. And basically what we say here, if friends exist, then we display them. Otherwise, if a JSON document contains a key message, we will read that message into a new variable, and if that variable is not empty, we will again display an alert view, something like that. Okay, so there are two places now when we display an alert message. One of them is when error took place, and the second is when we have a message to be displayed from a server side. So let's create a new function that will be responsible for displaying an alert message to a user, and reuse that function to display that message. So I'm using UIAlertController. So basically we are instantiating alert controller with the message that was passed to our function as a parameter, and then we create only one action, UI alert action, which is going to have a title OK, like OK button, and when there is no completion handler, so nothing is going to happen to our alert when user taps on OK button, except that alert will disappear. And then we present this alert to a user. Now I can reuse this display alert function here. So I will use self display alert message, and I will pass error message to this function, and I will also use this function here. And in this case, we are going to display a message from the error object, and error object will contain a localized description of the message. Okay, so let's build and see if we get any errors. Our build failed. Let's look why. An optional, right? We need to add an exclamation mark at the end. Let's build it again. Okay, so build succeeded. Now, because we are running this script inside of our background thread, I mean from the completion handler, which is executed in a background, and because we are communicating back to our UI, we need to run this from, we need to dispatch an asynchronous task on the main queue. And I will take all this code and put it inside of a new asynchronous task. So I'll dispatch async, dispatch get main queue, and I will add another curly bracket here. Let's build it to make sure everything is okay. Yes. And again, I do it because this data task with the request will be executed on a separate as a background thread, and so that our mobile application is not does not freeze and does not make user wait unresponsive. And as soon as our completion handler completes, then if we want to communicate back to our UI, like display message or update some of the labels, we will need to dispatch an asynchronous task on the main queue. Now, when we receive data from our server side, we loop through the friends array, and then we populate search results. Now, when the search result is populated, we want to do two things. Well, first of all, we need to update our table, and the way we do it, we would use self my table view and then call for reload data. That will trigger a table view delegate function to work. And first of all, this number of rows in section will be triggered, and it will look how many values do we have in search results. And if there is one, our table view will be reloaded with one cell. But if there are two, table view will be reloaded with two cells, and then this function will be called. So now when this function is called, self-arrowed index path, we are dequeuing a cell, but the cell will be returned empty. So for this cell to contain value, we will need to set it. So each cell will have a text label, and we will set text of that text label to whatever value is stored in our search results for that row. So I will use a reference search results, and then I will reference index path row. So for the row, for the first cell, it will take the first value of our search results, and for the second cell, it will take the second value from our search results. Okay, now let's go back to our script here and add a couple of more lines of code. So first of all, before adding more values to our search result, we need to make sure that our search result is empty, because otherwise our search results array will be containing old search results as well. So when our completion handler executes, we will need to remove all keys from our search results, and to make the table view not contain anything, we will also reload that. And when table is reloaded, because our search results array is empty, it will clear it out and will display a new data that has just arrived from our server. So I guess this is it for this script now. So let's run it and see if it works. Okay, my mobile app is up and running. I will type a new keyword. Let's say, for example, Steve. Tap on search button, and I get search result Steve Jobs. And let me type only first few characters of that keyword. It still finds. Let me type another name, Bill. Yes, and it works. Let me make it case all lowercase, Bill Gates, and again Steve, and it finds. And let me clear it, Jobs, still finds it. Okay, although our cancel button is not working yet, so let's go ahead and enable the cancel button. So I'll stop this application, give myself a little more room, scroll down, select the cancel button, click on control button on my keyboard, click, drag and drop here, and I'll create a new action connection, and I'll call it cancel button tapped. Okay, and what do we want to do when cancel button is tapped? Well, probably first we would like to clear the search bar by setting it to an empty string. So we will set it to an empty string, and then probably we want to hide the keyboard, so the keyboard disappears by calling function resign first responder. And then if we wanted, we can clear the table view results as well. But let's skip it. When user cancels, we will just clear search bar, and we will dismiss but search result, dismiss the keyboard, but let's keep search results so that at least user can see them, or maybe tap on one of them and continue to maybe a different view or see details of that friend. So let's run it again and just make sure that our cancel button is working and search result is still working after we did some changes to our source code. So if I tap on cancel button, nothing happens, but if I type something, cancel, it clears the search bar and dismisses the keyboard. Hit search, nothing is found. Look for a job. Steve Jobs was returned. Okay, I think this completes our example using UISearchBar and sending a post HTTP request to our PHP script and performing case insensitive search in our MySQL database. I hope these videos were helpful to you, and if you have any questions, if something is not working, please feel free to message me and I'll help you out as soon as I can.